This episode is made possible by purchasing resources through the Creation Science for Kids store.
Welcome to the Creation Science
for Kids
show. Have you ever wished Adam and Eve had just left the forbidden fruit alone? Or even better, that God had never put that awful tree in the garden in the first place? We consider why God had to put the tree there and how it shows us who we are and what kind of God we have. Plus, we look at the vast numbers of real heavenly twins and the king of beasts, the lion. Praise the Lord. I will give thanks to the Lord with my whole heart, in the company of the upright, in the congregation. Great are the works of the Lord, studied by all who delight in them. Full of splendor and majesty is his work, and his righteousness endures forever. He has caused his wondrous works to be remembered. The Lord is gracious and merciful. Psalm 111, verses 1 through 4. This is episode 45 of the podcast where we learn about Jesus, our Creator, and His amazing world. Hi, I'm Sherry Fields, your host, and I'm joined today by my co-host Timothy.
Hi.
And Joseph.
Hello.
To follow along with what we're looking at, check out the show notes. creationscience4kids.com/trees. In our show, we've been taking our time going through the first 2 chapters of the Bible. There's a lot of ideas to cover, but I'm also in no hurry to get to when we sin and mess things up royally. But today we're up to the first shadow of what's coming. So let's read Genesis chapter 2, verses 16 and 17. Would you read them for us, please, Joseph?
And the Lord God commanded the man, saying, Of every tree of the garden thou mayest freely eat, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil thou shalt not eat of it, for in the day that thou eatest thereof thou shalt surely die.
Thank you, Joseph. What's going on here? Have you ever played a video game where no matter where you turned, you had to be super careful not to mess up or you would die?
Yes.
Yeah, I find those games really annoying. But if you get good at them, it's kind of cool. Was that what was going on in the Garden of Eden? Everywhere they turned, was there God saying, no, no, no?
No.
No.
No. What was it like? What did he say? You can eat of?
Every tree except for the tree of the knowledge of good and evil.
Every tree except for one. Yeah. What does that tell you about what God is like? Is he a God that likes to tell people, no, you can't have any fun?
No.
No. He invented all the wonderful fruits that people love to eat. Those were all his idea. He loves beautiful. He loves tasty. He loves all kinds of good things. But he also did put one tree that he told them no. Why? Imagine you went to somebody's house, and they never told anybody no. They let you do whatever, take whatever, play whatever, jump on the beds. What would that be like?
That would be horrible.
Would
everybody would be getting hurt or not getting something?
Yeah. At first, it would be kind of fun, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Jumping on the bed is fun until
You fall off.
you fall off. Eating sugar with no protein is fun until
You get a stomach ache.
you get a stomach ache, you get, your brain goes crazy because the sugar crash. So yeah, it would be fun for a little while to have no rules at all. But rules are in place because they're good for us. But God didn't have to make the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. He did it anyway. Here's what's going on, and this is a big idea, and I've run into people who said God was a meanie setting it up and then making it so that when they ate one fruit, he ruined everything for us. But if God hadn't, it would have been a really awful thing too. Here's another way to picture it. Imagine a family that has a baby just starting to crawl around, and they had made it so baby-proofed that the baby never was told no, what would it be like? What kind of things would have to be there for the baby never to hear no? What are the kinds of things when you have to tell a little one, no, you can't, or you must do this when they don't want to? What about when a little one, usually around 6 months old, and it's time to fasten them in their car seat? How do they like that?
I don't.
They don't. So if you didn't tell the baby no, you would either have to never put them in the car in the first place and they never get to go anywhere, or not fasten them in, and then if it was a car accident. But in this case, the way we're picturing it is that you would never take the baby anywhere. That would be one way to never have to tell the baby, no, you must do this. What else? Babies have sharp fingernails. When they're brand new, parents will often put little socks or things over their hands so they can't scratch their faces. But what do they start doing to other people as they get older?
They start scratching them.
Yes. So if you didn't want to tell the baby no ever, you would have to...
You would have to put safety things over their fingers.
Right. And then what would be the problem with that?
They couldn't open anything.
Right. They couldn't play with anything. Or if you didn't want to put anything on their hands and you didn't want to tell them no, and you didn't want to get scratched, you would just...
declaw them?
That would be awful, though, wouldn't it? God gave us nails for a reason, to protect our fingers. Or you could just not pick them up, right?
Oh, yeah.
So anything that we do to take away all choice limits what is actually possible. God wanted... Why did he make man? What was his point of creating human beings? What did he want?
He wanted somebody to talk to.
To be with and to walk with.
That's right. And if you make something that does whatever you tell it to and never does anything bad because it can't, what would we call that kind of a thing if we made it?
A robot.
A robot.
A robot. Exactly. Sorry?
I want a robot.
A robot would be fun, but would it ever really be your best friend?
No.
Why not? Why would the robot do the stuff you told it to?
Because I would program it to.
You would program it. What if you told it a story?
I would program it to listen to me.
Yes, but would you really feel heard by the robot? Like you would with your friend at church? Which would matter more to you?
Your friend.
Why?
Because he's real.
Yes, he's real. And when he pays attention, you know what about your friend that you don't know about the robot?
He's listening.
Because the robot listens because you
programmed it.
Your friend listens because he
likes you.
That's right. He likes you. He wants to. And that's what God wanted. He didn't want a robot. He wanted somebody with choice. And if he hadn't put any way for Adam to prove that he would obey and follow and listen to God, as we'll get to when they listened to the serpent instead, it was who would they believe? Who would they follow? And having that tree allowed them to show what really mattered to them. There's some other things besides that God wanted a real relationship with us. Also, when he set up the garden, God talked to the man. He commanded him. He said, you can eat, you may not eat of this one tree. He told him exactly how things stood. He didn't give a secret test to see, if I stick this one tree in, I wonder how long it'll be before he runs into it and takes the wrong one and ruins his life. Did he do anything like that?
No.
No, that is not at all God. God is very clear and upfront. He is honest. He tells us the truth. But he's also holy. When somebody does something wrong, there must be consequences. What did he say would happen? In the day that thou eatest thereof,
thou shalt surely die.
Die. Because even though fruit itself is not some horrible thing, disobeying God is. In fact, I ran into somebody talking about this when I was researching, saying it makes sense that God did not choose some awful thing. He didn't say, you may do whatever you want, but don't beat up your wife. He didn't say that because he wanted it very clear that what was at stake here, what God was interested in, was whether Adam would listen to God and do what he said, even if it was just leave a tree alone. It was God that mattered. So here it says, for in the day that thou eatest thereof, thou shalt surely die. What was he talking about? This is something where when we look at the Hebrew, it helps. So we know it's in the day that he eats, this will happen. But then it says, in the Hebrew, it's the best way to put it in English is to say, dying you shall die, which kind of gives us some interesting ideas. What do you think God was saying? Because did they eat the fruit and it was poison and they fell over plop on the ground?
No.
No. We know, how long did Adam live? Over 900 years.
Wow.
So yeah, that doesn't sound like don't eat the fruit, it's poison. But what was happening? Do you know? Have you ever thought about this?
No.
What did happen as soon as they ate the fruit? First of all, how did they feel?
Horrible.
Ashamed, horrible. That whole part of their conscience was twisted and bent. Also, when we look at the science, we know that what actually causes death when it's not caused by disease, just dying of old age, is the ends of the DNA start to wear out where it can no longer copy. That wearing out and wearing down process would have started the moment they ate the fruit. The other thing that happened, what is it we know from the New Testament is true of people who don't have Jesus? They do not have a working, do you know what we get a new one when we get saved? A working spirit. When they were created to be in relationship and talking with and friends with God, they would have been able to connect with him because God is spirit. When they disobeyed, that part of them on their own was dead. Without Jesus, we cannot connect with God, not the way he had meant. So that's part of it. Now, one of the interesting things, in Numbers 26, God was talking about when the people had refused to go into the land of Canaan because they were scared of the giants. And he said, okay, because of that, you're all going to die here in the wilderness. He used the exact same phrase, dying you shall die. Do you remember what happened to all those soldiers that had refused to go in to fight the giants?
They died.
Did they die that very day?
No, they died after 40 years.
Over the course of 40 years. Some of them died sooner, some of them died later, but all of them by the end were all dead. So we do know that that phrase can be used for something that's sure, but not instantaneous like poison or electrocution or something. And one other thing, had Adam seen anything die when God told him that?
No.
No. You wonder, now, that's something we haven't talked about, and I won't spend very long on it because we don't know much. But just like everything else, God had to give Adam a complete basic language, just like he gave him a complete basic grown-up body. He had to give him words for things that no one except God had ever used before. So one of them would have been death, and Adam would have had to do what? To when God said, dying you shall die, when he's never seen death. What would Adam have had to do?
He would have had to figure out what it was.
Yeah, he could have thought about it and God might have put pictures in his mind, but he still, because he had never seen it, he would have to
believe him.
That's right. He had to choose whether to trust God or not. And that, as we will see, is exactly the test where when Satan was talking to Eve, he lied about that and said, oh no, that won't happen. So Eve had to choose whether to trust what her husband told her God had said or what Satan was telling to her. No one knew at that point who was really trustworthy, although Adam had already seen that God had made him and loved him and gave him a home. So they had to decide who their allegiance would go to, but it was based on trust. They had not seen death. And that is at the middle of all sin. Who will we trust? Will we trust our own ideas, which is really Satan lying to us and to our old nature? Or will we trust God when he says, if you obey me, I will give you life? All right. Now that was a pretty heavy topic, and I think you guys did pretty well at it. But I found a joke for you today. What type of tree fits in your hand?
But I don't know.
A palm tree?
Very good. Yes, a palm tree.
Oh.
Okay, now I wanted to tell you about a fascinating article I ran into in the Answers magazine, put out by Answers in Genesis. And this is one of the ones where it does cost some money, worth every penny. And if you order it through my website, I get, I think it's a 12% commission. Doesn't cost you anymore, but it helps pay for the podcast hosting and my website hosting, which is coming up next spring. And it really is good. They even have a mini magazine in the middle for kids, which is a lot of fun. But this is something, it's not written by the guy that I saw at the Creation Research Society, but it's on the same topic as one of the presentations I saw, talking about binary stars or twin stars. Did you know that over half the stars we can see are actually not single stars? They're two stars spinning around each other? Isn't that cool?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like the one closest to us is called Alpha Centauri, and there's actually two of them because there's Alpha Proxima, and they're pretty bright and they spin around each other. I don't know, it didn't mention much about them, so I can't remember how fast they spin. But what's cool about these is some of them spin around super quickly, like within a couple days. Huge stars. Because you've seen where if you have a scale model of our solar system, the sun is the size of a basketball and the earth is the size of a...
golf ball?
Do you remember? We should do that again. It's the size of a pea. That's how small it is. So that's something hugely enormous. And our sun is an average size star. So here's something that huge and they're spinning around each other. So what's cool is they spin around and they get closer and closer and spin faster and faster until they start. It's called, in the article by Ronald G. Samek, he calls it their atmosphere. It's a plasma atmosphere. It's not like nitrogen like ours. So it's glowing stuff and it starts streaming from one star that's slightly smaller and lighter to the other star. And it's almost like a toy on a string, but it's not actually the string. It's all being pulled by gravity. Yeah, like those ping pong toys that you bounce. So it looks kind of like that, but they're spinning around. Very cool stuff. And eventually they'll merge if you give it enough time, which is what he's talking about. This guy is a professor. So he's done some work with his students where they figure out how long would it take for the ones that spin around quickly enough that you can see them well with your telescope and watch how they blink off and on. Oh, one of the cool things about them is because when one star gets right in front of the other, eclipses the other one, it lets us see which star is putting out how much brightness, what's it made of, what are its densities. It allows us to really study stars in a way we couldn't if there weren't a whole bunch of these binaries. Which tells us what about God? When he made the local stars, at least, what did he make sure and do?
He made them very complicated.
So that we could
figure out what they were and how they worked.
Yeah, because there's one DVD put out by people who just are talking about there must be some intelligence out there in some way, that the guy started looking at more than just naturalism where there's no God and realized that there's more to it than this when he saw how perfectly situated Earth is in our galaxy to be able to see and study, and even how the moon, the distance from the sun so that the eclipse is just right so we could study the sun, all those things. So here's another detail God put into his universe that lets science happen. Because if we didn't have a bunch of binary stars, we wouldn't be able to learn as much about them. But he was studying these spinning stars and realized that on average, these stars could only stay apart for about 80 million years, going at just normal rates with no miracles happening. Do you know how old they want the galaxies to be?
have billions and billions.
Billions. And 80 million compared to a billion is what?
920,000.
Million.
920 million. Yes.
920 million. So, yes, that's way, way too big. But compared to what they want us to believe, that the galaxies are a couple of billion years old and the universe is 4.6 billion years old, 80 million is not very long. Not for them. So, it does not work well for the Big Bang. But we have no problem with it. Because if they were right that the universe is as old as they want us to believe, then we should not be seeing any of these binary stars. They should all be mushed together into bigger megastars. But we still see them, and we can still study them, and we can still see how amazing God is. And also, we were talking earlier about God wanted friends. So what did he give? I think it said 60% of the stars. Yeah. More than 60% of the single points of light we observe at night are multiple star systems. So he even gave stars
And other stars.
And
Friends.
names.
friends. Isn't that cool?
And names.
Yes. And he gave them names.
All of them. All the billions and millions.
All right. What do you have for us today, Timothy?
I have lions.
Cool.
Lions are the second biggest member of the cat family.
How big are they?
They are between 4.5 and 6.5 feet long.
Okay, which is about 1.5 to 2 meters long.
Plus, their tail is another 26 to 39 inches.
About another meter of tail. Wow. So that's up to 3 meters from nose to tail tip. Wow. That's like 9 feet. Is that big?
Yeah, that's like,
Yeah.
they weigh up to 420 pounds.
That's 190 kilograms. Yeah. That's heavy.
Male lions are usually bigger in size and weight than female lions. The male lions have thick manes around their heads.
Mm-hmm. So what do they use their manes for?
They use their manes to keep them warm and to protect them in battles that they do with other lions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, we were reading in the Acts and Facts from ICR, and it talked about manes. What did they find has to happen for them to have a big, full, beautiful mane?
It has to be cold.
Yeah, what did they find? Because the guy was studying lions that lived at zoos. He found that they needed to get, he checked the January nighttime temperature. And if it was really cold, they had
Large manes.
But if it was warm all night, all year,
They didn't have manes.
And what else do we know? What kind of, you already said it's which kind of lions usually have good big manes?
The African.
Yeah, and they have to be, do the lionesses have big manes usually?
No.
Yeah, so they also need the male hormones. Every once in a while, a lady lion will have a mane, but that's usually because their hormone levels are off. Okay, and there was one other thing. Oh, yeah. The ones that live in the desert, what do they need? They could still have big manes if
It was rainy.
they got water at a certain time of year, if they had enough to drink. Yeah, it was a really fascinating article that they're just finding those things out now. Okay. All right. What color is a lion?
A lion is brown.
Yeah. Is it a plain brown like chocolate?
No.
No?
It's a yellowish brown.
Golden brown. Yeah. And what about its belly underneath?
It's a kind of whitish
Very,
brown.
yeah, very pale. Okay. Where do lions like to live?
They like to live in grasslands, woodlands.
What kind of woodlands?
Open woodlands.
Right. And do you know what scrub is that you read?
No.
That means bushes. Why would it like open woodlands but not thick forests? What do lions like to do?
They like to jump around.
Not like a leopard. Leopards and panthers like to hang out in trees and then jump down on their prey. But lions often do what when they're trying to catch their lunch?
They like to hide.
And then?
And then pounce.
Right, and they'll run. So they need to be able to see, but the tall grasses and the scrub bushes let them hide so they don't have to run very far. Okay, where do they live today?
They live in Tanzania.
Where is that?
That's in Africa.
Right, so the famous ones with the big manes live in Africa. Where else do they live? There are some still in...
South.
Yeah.
Sen-
Those are all African countries. But there are some others that don't have the big manes as much. Where do they live?
India.
India. Now, did you find out whether there are any left in Persia? The Persian lion?
No.
No. Where do we know they used to live?
In Persia.
And where do we read about them as well? Who killed one that we know? Samson. And where did he live? What country?
Israel.
Israel doesn't have any lions anymore, for which I think they're very grateful, just like we're grateful not to have dinosaurs anymore. Yeah. What else? Oh, yeah. Well, I think I see a theme because there's one other thing that lions are special. When you think of a tiger or a leopard, you usually think of them hunting all alone. What about lions? How do lions live?
They live with their family.
Yeah. Do you remember what those families are called? A pride of lions. Yeah. So lions hang out with the daddy and several mommies and then their cubs. They send off the young male lions when they get old enough. But they live in families. So God likes families. Anything else?
But they can hide really good in dry grass, and that they can pretend to be grass with their mane.
Yeah, right, because they're the color of dry grass.
They can catch gazelles really easily.
That's right. Okay, so we haven't talked about what they eat. So they like gazelles, which are they leap around like zebras. So they eat what kind of food? What do we call that? Meat. And what do we call an animal that only eats meat?
A carnivore.
Yeah, now, before we close, there are some lions that don't eat meat. I read once about the circus. They have the lions, and to make sure that they weren't likely to ever attack their trainers, they would feed them only milk. And that's what they ate for years. And there's also one, Creation Ministries International has a cool article on him, where there was this lioness that was raised by a guy in Italy who fed her spaghetti with tomato sauce. And that's all she ate. And eventually he couldn't take care of her, and even the zoo, they couldn't afford to keep her. So when they sent her off to Africa to reintroduce her to the wild, they had to teach her to eat meat because she did not want to eat it. She wanted her spaghetti instead. So it is possible for cats like the lion to live without having to eat meat, like God designed us to all do at the beginning, and we will at the end of time when Jesus comes back and makes everything right again. And that reminds me of one of my favorite passages in Isaiah 11. It's talking about when Jesus comes back, and he will not judge after the sight of his eyes, nor reprove after the hearing of his ears, but with righteousness he shall judge the poor. And it mentions that the wolf also shall dwell with the lamb, and the leopard shall lie down with the kid, that's the baby goat, and the calf and the young lion and the fatling together, and a little child shall lead them. And the lion shall eat straw like the ox, and the earth shall be full of the knowledge of the Lord as the waters cover the sea.
Don't forget, you can find links to all the things we have talked about today by visiting the show note page, Creation Science, 4kids.com/trees or /0045 for episode 45.
While you're there, I'd like to ask for your help. If you know someone who might enjoy listening to this podcast and checking out my website, would you let them know for us? Every article I do, including today's show notes, has share buttons to make it super easy for you to pass on to your friends on Facebook or by email. You have amazing power to help your friends find out the truth with just a click of a button.
Plus, if you want to encourage just leaving the show rating on iTunes is a great way to do that and help families looking for new podcasts to find us.
Thanks. Has your family signed up for my weekly email newsletter? Once a week, I share interesting creation resources I've run into, as well as the link to that week's article, which means you won't have to bother remembering how to find the show notes again. Plus, I can announce when life happens and I'm a day late, like I have been this time. Do you like science? Got a subject you want to learn about? Or maybe you like telling stories? Remember, it's super easy to turn your smartphone into a recorder. And if you send me a report, story, joke, or interesting idea, I might use it in a future show. Head over to creationscience4kids.com/podcast to find out what to do. Well, this finishes up our show for today. Until next time.
Have fun treasuring our amazing universe and creator.
Thou art worthy, O Lord, to receive glory and honor and power. For thou hast created all things, and for thy pleasure they are and were created. Revelation 4:11.